Thanks for going through a couple of technical challenges with us, everybody. Normally, we run these as web meetings and not webinars, so I appreciate your patience while we've been figuring out our technology. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Mark Meyer, and I'm the president of OnGuard Systems. We don't have a dog in the fight so far as selling anything during this outbreak. We're simply here to help provide good information. My background is on the chemical side of the industry as a supplier the previous 20 years prior to OnGuard Systems. So I think maybe through the dialogue that I've seen online, what I've heard about out in the field, the sheer number of contractors who we touch base with and talk with on a regular basis, maybe we can bring some good and pertinent and simple information back to you now, and maybe we can provide good resources and tools to you going forward. Before we begin this presentation, let me just tell you who OnGuard is, and then we've got Doug Hoffman in the room also from Normie, and he'll introduce himself, and then we'll get started with the presentation. So OnGuard Systems is a company born out of the sheer need for contractors to have a inspection and a insurance-backed warranty solution for their businesses. So in normal times, we help contractors create upsells from their remediation and restoration businesses and get recurring income going in their businesses, whether it be from the services that we provide on the insurance-backed guarantees, or whether it be the recurring income that, of course, comes from that 5.51% of homes that are always going to have losses each and every year. So that's what we do. We're a digital platform, and our business is working with contractors and providing peace of mind to homeowners. So let me introduce Doug Hoffman. Many of you already know Doug from Normie, but please, Doug, introduce yourself.
Hey, Mark, thank you. Yes, my name is Doug Hoffman. I'm currently the executive director of Normie, which is the National Organization of Remediators and Mold Inspectors. I came out of the construction industry. I've been in the construction industry about 45 plus years. And I realized back in the late 90s, mid 90s, that a lot of the issues that people were dealing with indoor air quality had to do with the way construction was done, the way houses were built, not controlling specific techniques and not controlling the quality of the work, moisture issues, and so forth. So I wrote a book regarding that called Mold-Free Construction, and that led me to actually beginning a training and certifying agency in 2004, which was Normie, to support the Louisiana mold licensing law. Since then, we've done a tremendous amount of training all over the country on indoor air quality problems, specifically mold, which is only one of the many indoor air quality problems there are. But I've worked with Mark over the last 8 or 9, 10 years probably, helping to set certification guidelines and protocol standards for the indoor air quality industry. So thank you, Mark, for inviting me to be here, and I'm glad to be able to help if I can.
Well, thanks, Doug. So what we're going to discuss today is this issue of some ignorance that is out there amongst contractors. We see it every day in the various face group pages and things, Facebook pages, and there is a lot of maybe confusion about products. There's this entire list by the CDC called the N list. And there's just a lot of information flying around. The other thing that we know is that during times like this, fly-by-night companies come out of the woodwork to prey on people who don't know any better, okay? And so what we're here today to do is to give you some very simple, easy to understand information. So if right now you're wondering how to go about selecting products for cleanup and disinfection yourself, or whether you're looking for a full-scale plan of attack as far as protocols are concerned and things of that nature, that's why the two groups are here today, both OnGuard and Normie. As we get started, I think it's important to understand the difference between an enveloped and a non-enveloped virus, okay? You hear a lot right now about the virus. You hear about ways to prevent against its spread. But I haven't seen a lot online yet, at least as it has been forward facing to contractors about understanding the differences between these. Because let's be honest, normally we're talking about something like bacterial tests after water damage cleanup or mold remediation and testing associated with clearance and things of that nature, right? So now we're talking about viruses, and viruses are very different from bacteria or other living organisms as compared to the RNA strand that is the virus. So the difference between a enveloped and a non-enveloped virus is simply the lipid bilayer that surrounds that virus. And I'm going to pull up a little scheme here so you can kind of take a look at this yourself. And we're primarily concerned about two different things. Now, inside of all of this, you can kind of see these squiggly lines, and that is representative of the virus itself, or what is really an RNA strand, right? So these are not living organisms like a cell or anything of that nature, and this in and of itself is not a cell wall, okay? This is just a lipid layer, and then what you'll see within this lipid layer is a number of different proteins. For us and for our conversation today, these proteins really don't matter to us. What matters to us is this RNA strand, which is the virus itself. And what also matters to us is this lipid layer that is surrounding or protecting the virus, okay? So before we get into the chemistry and those sorts of things, one thing I thought that it might be important to do is establish some testing parameters. Now, I'm going to bring up a real quick slide, and Doug's going to talk about this for a second. But because we don't have the ability to surface test or to air test for this virus, in place of that, surrogates are used. And there's been a lot of people kicking around ideas about different types of testing that could be used as a surrogate. But I think that it is important to hear from Doug and from Normie as to why maybe certain types of surrogates are useful and some surrogates are not useful. So, Doug, would you talk with us about this?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. It's interesting because we've talked about, since we started doing training in 2004, we've talked about utilizing mold as a surrogate for other indoor air quality issues. And of course, the concept is that if you deal with mold, you can also, with those same technologies, deal with a lot of other microbial contaminants. So let me just define that word for a second, surrogate, because some people don't know exactly what it means. The word actually means substitute or standing in the place of. And so you're testing for one thing, but if whatever it is that you're using takes care of that one thing, then there's a whole shopping list of other things that it might take care of. The American Society for Microbiology, for instance, says that the term surrogate is used to indicate a substitute for an item of interest. In the context of environmental microbiology and health risk assessment, we've defined surrogates as organisms, particles, and substances used to study the fate of a pathogen in a specific environment. And probably the thing that we are most familiar with, or at least most common people are familiar with that don't get into all the details of this, is with water testing. As you can imagine, there's thousands and thousands of chemistries that could be in the water and contaminants that are in the water, but the EPA only tests for about 90 of those, 80 to 90. And what they say is if we can remove these, then there's a whole shopping list of contaminants that are much less powerful or pathogenic, much weaker, that we know we can remove if we remove these. So that's the concept of surrogate testing, and there are certain tests that you can do that are general microbial testing, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about in our class on this subject coming up very soon, and that's testing air and surfaces for microbial loads. And so without getting too crazy about that, I'll tell you what we're looking at. We're looking at swab testing, where you can test a surface and using a bacterial non-speciated bacterial load. You can tell whether that surface is contaminated or not. That would be your pre-testing, which is basically creating a baseline, then going in and sanitizing that environment and taking post-testing, looking for the same levels of microbial load. That would be using that as a surrogate for fungus, for bacteria, and also for viruses. The other thing that I think is interesting is aerosol sampling, and we might talk about this in some detail if Mark would like to. But the thing about aerosol sampling is that if you use IAQ panel, a generic panel for testing the air, what's in the air, not just looking for mold spores, but for pollen and dead skin cells and dust mite legs and things that might be floating around in the air. If you take an air sample that's more generic in its scope, a panel, as it were, of a bunch of contaminants, those are actually things that viruses and bacteria live on and float around on. And so when they talk about viruses being airborne, for instance, they don't have wings, but they can float around like a little magic carpet ride on the dust particulate that's floating around in the air, much of which is submicron. You only see in a shaft of light. Well, if you can measure that and you can use it as a pre and post test, then you can have a pretty good indication that you're improving the environment by lowering the microbial load in that environment by just those two samples alone, air and surface sampling.
So really what we're talking about here is establishing and maintaining levels of cleanliness. And as you have probably heard and everybody's been exposed to, maintaining cleanliness, whether it be on surfaces in the air, your hands, your skin, etc., is of the utmost importance right now. So we don't just see these services as taking place one time and done. We see these services taking place up front to reduce that contaminant load or to establish a level of cleanliness and then to maintain that over time. Is that correct, Doug?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. And I think it's interesting because I think everybody understands, especially in hospital settings and educational facilities where they have scheduled maintenance programs to keep the surfaces clean. We've been training for years, as you know, on this concept of indoor air quality management, that there are things you can do to make sure that you're dealing with both the air and the surfaces on an ongoing basis and keeping that environment clean. And of course, that's pretty easy to prove if you're using objective testing.
Doug, I've seen over and over again a number of people talking about ATP testing and the use of luminometers. Can you speak to the use of ATP testing and luminometers right now?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question because we know, if you know what ATP luminometer is, adenosine triphosphate, what that's doing is measuring something that's typically found in all living organisms and really whether dead or alive. So ATP luminometer testing, which is a very quick 15 seconds actually, very quick way to screen an environment on the surfaces, is incredibly effective as a screening method because it can tell you what the total microbial load is on a surface. It won't tell you whether it's fungus or whether it's bacteria or whether it's virus, but it will tell you what the microbial load is. Now, the problem is this, and this is why we don't include it in our protocols. We recommend that it can be used as a screening process to say, yeah, there's a lot of contamination here, so now I'm going to test. But the difference is, the problem with ATP luminometer screening, Mark, is that it doesn't really discriminate between not only type, but it doesn't discriminate by size. And so it's going to read a dead skin cell exactly the same in terms of the way it reads it, ATP, as a bacteria, but what's the difference in size between the two? And so if you have a lot of dead skin cells, you might have one or two dead skin cells, it might give you the same reading as if you had 100,000 bacterial cells. So because it doesn't discriminate between the size or the type, we really highly recommend it only as a screening tool to say, yeah, this environment maybe needs to have more done to it, and then use regular lab testing, third-party lab testing, to make sure that you've identified what those bacteria counts are.
we've been talking a lot about the importance of third party here, not only a third party agency such as Normie to provide for a protocol that goes through a battery of tests when it comes to your insurances and things of that nature. But overall, how we can use third parties to lower the risk, lower the liability to contractors in general. Not every contractor understands that maybe, and sometimes they write their own protocols or depend upon the protocols of something like a chemical company or whatever the case may be to set them for them. Can you speak about the importance of a third-party protocol specifically from a company like Normie?
Yeah, I'm so big on this idea of third party, and the reason for that is because in the construction industry, I learned really early on, and I'm talking 40, 50 years ago, I learned really early that I needed to make sure that if I was using some third party, I was using them to be able to shift the liability from me to them. And so the example that I use typically is as a contractor, if I were hiring a subcontractor, I would make sure that that subcontractor had a certificate of insurance, and not just a certificate, but that he was in fact insured for workers' comp. Well, why? The reason is because if his employee gets hurt on my job and his insurance is not current, then I'm liable for that. So if his insurance is current as a subcontractor, then I've shifted the liability to him. And what you're talking about in terms of what we're trying to do with Normie is we train our guys all the time on how they need to use third-party testing. Don't carry around a microscope and try to identify the mold. Use a laboratory, and then you're shifting the liability to them if you have a misreading. And it's the same thing with protocols. If you have a good protocol that's an insured legal protocol by a third party, then when you use that protocol, if something goes wrong on the project, it's not you that's liable for it, it's the protocol, right? The one who wrote the protocol. And I think that's the concept, is rather than being out there hanging out on your own, one of the things that a company like we can provide is the strength of a third-party confirmation that the work that you did was done correctly.
Great. Thank you, Doug. I just wanted, I'm so concerned right now about our contractors and contractors in general as it pertains to liability that I think that we need to keep beating this drum about how they can manage liability, whether it be in the products that they are using, what they're saying, right? The contracts that they're signing, or the protocol that they're using.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Again, kind of a simple process, but if you install a window the way the manufacturer told you to install it, then if something goes wrong, it's the manufacturer that's on the hook.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about cleaning versus killing, because we all know about this end list, or at least most of us know about this end list that's being put out there. And I think that people are looking to that end list almost indiscriminately when it comes to the cleaning and the antimicrobial or disinfectant side of things, and they are just saying, well, it's on the end list, let's select that. But what we're forgetting is that preceding any sort of antimicrobial use, you always want to clean surfaces first. Any product out there that is an antimicrobial or a disinfectant or a sanitizer is always going to say pre-clean surfaces prior to use. And there's a couple good reasons for that. Now, as it pertains to cleaning, the definition of cleaning, or at least a simple definition, would be the removal of the soil load from the surface. Doesn't really matter what that soil load could be. It just is the contamination that's on the surface that needs to be removed. Why? Because, first of all, by having contamination on a surface prior to disinfecting that surface, you are interfering with the functionality of the antimicrobial or the disinfectant that you're trying to use in the first place, which reduces its impact and efficacy overall. So you want to pre-clean a surface prior to any use of any disinfectant or antimicrobial before you use it. Otherwise, you're not doing the job properly, right? So think of it this way. You want to clean the surface by removing the contaminants on the surface. And the other thing that does for you is it solubilizes or it dissolves the lipid coat around this virus, okay? So all cleaners contain surfactants. What is important about a surfactant is that it is lipid soluble, right? It will dissolve that fat layer that is surrounding that RNA strand, which makes it naked, okay? And that's what we're trying to get to, is this naked RNA strand, so that it is so that we are able to kill it, destroy it, deteriorate it, whatever you want to call that. Okay, so cleaning has a lot of purposes. Cleaning removes the contamination from the surface. It allows you to solubilize the membrane surrounding the virus, and it prevents interference with any antimicrobial chemistry there is to come. Now, once you have done that stage, okay, you've solubilized, you've removed contamination, you've prevented interference, now that's when you can use an antimicrobial or a disinfectant on the surface. And there's two things actually that can happen. Either you can disintegrate that RNA strand via oxidation, which we're going to talk about in a moment here, or you can, since it's a naked RNA strand, it can now deteriorate pretty rapidly on its own. Not to the extent that if you were to oxidize it, it would, but nevertheless, it would still deteriorate much faster than allowing that lipid layer to remain in place. So hopefully that's clear as to why you want to clean prior to actually killing or using an antimicrobial or disinfectant on the surface itself. So let's break that down into a couple chemistries when we're talking about chemicals themselves. You've really got two different types. You've got your solubilizers and you've got your oxidizers. So when it comes to your solubilizers, that should be on the cleaning side of things. Then you're talking about alcohol-based solutions, phenolic-based solutions, whether they be natural like Thymol types of products, or whether they be synthetic, which are in your Lysols and all other products. Your quaternary ammonium chlorides are solubilizers. They're really just a different type of surfactant, but your quaternary ammonium chlorides are a surfactant. And then your quat functional siloxanes are also based on surfactancy or solubilization, only it's durable to the surface, right? So now you can look at this from the perspective of upfront. Do we want to solubilize the lipid layer itself with one of these chemistries? And then over time, do we maybe want to protect the surface using something like a quat functional siloxane that's durable to the surface to keep that up? The idea being that if we can lay down a surface of quat functional siloxane, then as the virus comes in contact with that surface, it's going to help solubilize that lipid bilayer so that, again, it's naked and it will not live as long on the surface. I'm sorry, I used the wrong word. Not live as long, but be effective, have efficacy as far as that RNA strand on the surface. It's so easy to use that term, and I apologize, and none of us should be talking about this as a living organism. The second thing is the oxidizer side of things. Once we have exposed that RNA strand and it's a naked strand, then we can use things like sodium hypochlorite cleaners or hydrogen peroxide cleaners. And I use that term, I tagged on the term cleaner to the back side of it, because one thing that you have to realize is that you could use a sodium hypochlorite product paired with a surfactant, or a hydrogen peroxide product paired with a surfactant, to give you both sides of the equation, both the cleaning and solubilization side of it, but also that side that allows you to oxidize that RNA strand. Okay, so I hope that that is helpful in helping you discern between those chemistries. I would really suggest don't look at the N list as something that is everything is created equal and everything's going to perform no matter what you do. I think understanding it from the standpoint of solubility and oxidation will really help you choose the better chemistries, and it will also make you a better teacher, a better educator of your customers, and give them a lot more confidence in your ability. I can only imagine myself as a customer, if I were to hear somebody come in and talk about the testing that they're going to use as a surrogate, why they go through this process of solubilizing the lipid bilayer of anything, including this virus. By the way, lipid bilayer applies to cell walls as well, which is why I say anything, right? Lipid bilayer, it does share some commonalities with a enveloped virus. And then the oxidation side of things, how we're going to destroy, erode, or mitigate that virus once it's exposed. I think if I heard that, I would feel better educated and more confident in hiring a contractor who really knew their stuff. The other thing that we want to do through this process is continue to be a resource for educational tools that will support you. Now, this video is going to go onto our Facebook, or not our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and please look to that occasionally as a resource. The video that I did last week, I think it was, just addressing the general public to understand this outbreak and to understand how to go about hiring a contractor is up there, and you're free to use that anytime that you would like to on social media, through email. We're going to continue to make, hopefully, videos that will be helpful to you, but we're also going to provide documentation along with Normie that are these quick glimpses that you can use with your customers to educate them on superior services, establishing and maintaining levels of cleanliness within the services that you're providing. So there'll be many more of these, and we're going to do our best to keep everyone informed, whether it be through email, through social media. So if you haven't already maybe followed the On Guard Facebook page, we are really just trying to do a service to the general public. Like we said, we've got nothing to gain by this directly right now by speaking with you and trying to be helpful. We're speaking with the general public. We're just trying to put resources together that can be helpful to you and that can help you be more helpful to your own customers. So with that, I would love for Doug to share with us an overview of the Certified Sanitization Professional, the class, the registration, any details, Doug, that you have on this and how we can help contractors and our friends mitigate liability when it comes to the cleanup surrounding COVID-19.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. This is really an important point. For those of you who don't know really who we are or not known that we've been around for quite a while, I want to tell you just a quick story. We started training on the mold licensing law in Louisiana in 2004. So we were formed in July of 2004. And of course, you know what happened in 2005 in New Orleans area with the Hurricane Katrina. And so it was shortly after that, of course, everyone came in and tried to help rebuild, and people were really concerned because we were talking about not using bleach on mold, but using other types of products, while a lot of people were using bleach. And so we created and developed what we called the Normie Certificate of Sanitization in 2006, and a lot of the guys that were trained by us was using that tool to ensure the homeowner and property owner that project that they did, they used our protocols and their training, and we would confirm that by testing. And so it was a third-party confirmation that the work that was done correctly. So that was in 2006. Here we are now in 2020, and we're dealing with, in a lot of ways, kind of a moving target to a lot of people. They're thinking about what we're dealing with as something we've never really dealt with before. Reality is that we have been dealing with microbial contamination, microbial load reduction for a very long time, not just mold, but also IAQ and surface contamination. And so we have used this instrument, this certificate of sanitization, I think in a very positive way to help our members know how to deal with contaminated environments. So we are introducing a brand new class called the Normie Certified Sanitizing Professional, CSP. It's gone through our legal and through our insurance carrier, and we're going to be introducing the class next week. We're going to have it on our website. You'll be able to go there and take a look at it. And what we're doing, Mark, is this is a 6-module class. It is, in fact, a certification. And in most cases, you would pay for the class, which is typically $600-700. You would go to the class, and then you would pay for a certification after you'd taken a proctored exam. What we're doing, because of this current situation, is we're going to be offering this 6-module class, which will be taken live online in some cases, and some of the modules are actually online courses. But these 6 modules, we're going to offer this course for free. There's no charge to take it. We want the information out there. It includes not only the discussions in much more detail, as Mark suggested, about chemistries to use. There'll be discussions on indoor air quality equipment and what should be used, terminology and nomenclature, what kind of claims you can make and not make, sampling techniques and why we use the sampling we do, and how to do that. So a lot of information in these 6 modules, but it will also include a very specific protocol called the microbial load reduction protocol that will be utilized for this certificate of sanitization. So we're offering the course for free. Again, you can register for it very quickly. I'll tell you how you can get your information to us so we can let you know when that's going to happen. But it's going to be a free class. The only thing that we're going to do is if somebody wants to be certified, they have to take a proctored exam. And that proctored exam can be done online, but it requires admin people. Our proctored exams normally are a couple of $100. We're going to drop it to $50 just so you can be certified once you take the exam. And then you can represent yourself as a Normie certified sanitizing professional. We think this is going to be a big boost and a help to people who want that third-party confirmation and credibility that Mark was talking about. And I think that this is going to be something that's going to be very big for our industry. Our mold guys have already been trained on IAQ and microbial reduction. They know that they can use mold as a surrogate, but this will give them an extra layer of clarity in dealing with what we're dealing with right now. And if I could say this, if you're interested in this class, if you can go to our website at normie.org, not .com, but normie.org, because we are a nonprofit trade association. And you'll see on the right-hand side a place where you can subscribe. Just give us your email address. That's all we're asking for. And then we'll be mailing out email invitations next week for that class. So that's what I wanted to share. Mark, is there anything else you think I should cover?
One more thing that I forgot to cover, and that is that we see a lot of pictures, and we don't want to make assumptions, but it's easy to make an assumption that when people are fogging or using electrostatic sprayers and things of that nature, they're just kind of in this mode of spray and pray, right? And the difference, if I'm going back to solubilizers and oxidizers, the difference between solubilizing, let's say a lipid bilayer or something like that, which feeds back into this idea of cleaning, versus the oxidation side of things, is that if we go back to our training, let's say it's IICRC S520, as it pertains to remediation, the reason that we talk about the use of the word's not friction, but you know what I mean, the use of scrubbing or the use of doing something, wipe down, abrasion in the process of cleaning, is that it's not just the chemistry itself that gives you that solubilization. By doing that act of cleaning, the wipe down itself, it allows you to solubilize with the use of the chemistry. So both sides of that are important. So if you are educating your customer, let them know that that physical action, that's the term I was looking for, the physical action, the act of cleaning itself, is part of the solubilization process. Yes, the choice of chemistry is important, but equally important is the physical action that takes place during cleaning. Oxidation, on the other side of that, does not require physical action. That's why you can treat with something that is hypochlorite-based or peroxide-based, etc., and you can eradicate that RNA strand at that point through that oxidation process. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to just throw that out there. I don't think a lot of people understand that there is that physical action that's necessary in the cleaning step.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We talked about that from the very beginning of our training in Louisiana, and now, of course, with the 5 states that require mold licensing, we always talk about mechanical removal of the contaminants. And then obviously there's a process for that, but you can't just, I like that idea, spray and pray. You
Yep.
can't do it. You got to remove the debris.
So if you are looking for more information on the Certified Sanitization Professional class, make sure to go to normie.org. How soon are they going to be able to register for that class, Doug?
Well, they can give us their subscription right now, and then we'll send them an email next week. I believe by Monday. I know they're working on the website today. I think I sent you a prototype of it, but it should be up probably by Monday at the latest. They'll be able to register.
Okay. Well, we hope that the time that we've taken with you today to talk about how to limit your liability, selecting the proper products, selecting the proper protocol, and making sure that those things are all fitting together so that you can provide the best services to the general public, the best education to the general public. We hope this has been helpful to you. Like we said, we are going to continue to work on videos and documentation and everything to support the education process of this, and hopefully direct the general public to the good guys, which we think are our industry. And we really appreciate you being here today, and we look forward to talking to you in the near future. If there's anything that you need from us, feel free to reach out. Most people here have our telephone number, have our website, but if you haven't gone to OnGuardGuarantee.com before, go ahead and check out On Guard Guarantee. You can always get in touch with us through there. You can go to our Facebook page or anywhere else that we happen to be, and we will be happy to take your suggestions in what tools can make your job easier or what can provide better education for your customers. Doug, thanks for coming today and being a part of this, and I look forward to hopefully joining you next week.
Sounds great, Mark. Thank you so much. Great to have